Welcome to the Manhattan Project. This is day 18. Earlier tonight, Evan and I once again headed out into the city to see two separate movies at the same theater. It's been a lonely week. Check out the footage of me going to go see Columbus at the IFC Center. I'm about to go into the IFC Center for my first time. I don't even know what I'm seeing, but yeah. It's over by Washington Square Park. Never been here before, but I know it's a cool spot. So Columbus is the feature film directorial and screenwriterial debut of Kogonada, internet personality. It stars John Cho as the son of a famous architect scholar who gets a stroke or some sort of sickness. It's kind of ill-defined. Anyway, it brings him from Korea back to America where he grew up into the small town of Columbus, Indiana, where he strikes an unlikely friendship, potentially blooming romantic relationship with the much, much younger Lu Richardson. It's all very pensive and quiet. Take a look at the trailer.
There's this belief that if you're not there when a family member dies, your spirit will roam aimlessly and become a ghost.
I saw you at the hospital.
Are you from here?
Yeah.
You like it here?
I'm really interested in architecture.
So John, what were your expectations going into this flick?
I know I like John Cho. I know nothing else. I knew Rory Culkin was in this movie. He is. I didn't mention that. A couple scenes. But yeah, that's all I knew. I knew John Cho was in this, and I knew it had very high on Rotten Tomatoes. And I think that it had played Sundance. I believe I knew that. But one of Evan's friends we got a drink with last week, and he was like, "You got to see this movie. It's fucking amazing, right?" So that's all I knew. So open for good stuff, but didn't really know what to expect as far as what it was actually going to be. Columbus is a mostly beautiful, meditative piece that makes up for, in acting and cinematography and locations, what it lacks in potentially connective, warm emotion. Okay, so what I mean by that is Columbus is the kind of movie where the camera moves, I think twice. I tried to count. I believe twice is the only time the camera moves. And even those two camera movements are very, very, very slow tracking shots of just people walking. So it's one of those movies where it never, although it's about emotions, although it's about human connection, although it's very grounded, there's nothing supernatural about it, it is shot in a way that is so clinical that never is trying to, it's the polar opposite of a handheld shaky cam close-up movie. No close-ups in this movie either, almost none, all sort of wide stuff. It is sort of the opposite of anything you've ever seen that indulges in intimacy. And that's purposeful. I'm not saying that as a criticism, it's just the truth. You cannot deny it. And that's the first thing I have to say getting into this movie. I did not know it was going to be like that. I'm not complaining. However, that's the big thing to take away from this movie. It's kind of interesting. So yeah, like I said, it stars John Cho as this guy who grew up in the States, is very Americanized, and now currently lives in Korea doing translations for a publishing company for books. And he has to all of a sudden fly into Columbus, Indiana to visit his father in the hospital when his father, a very successful, famed architect, scholar, gets sick and is hospitalized. So from then, that's the first 10 minutes of the movie. You really just get John Cho talking with and looking at architecture alongside Lu Richardson, the girl from Split with the blonde hair, and the friend of Haley Steinfeld over in Edge of 17. She's been just a ton of stuff recently. One of those actresses that you didn't know who she was a year ago, but now she's in everything, right? And that's the meat of the movie, is them talking about life philosophies, the relationships they have with their respective parents, and architecture, mostly just architecture. Architecture stands in for a lot of the themes, a lot of the emotions, a lot of what this movie's trying to say. And on all those fronts, what it's trying to attempt, right? What it's trying to say with these characters, how you're supposed to feel about them, I imagine, and sort of the visual intensity that it's going for, the use of line, where they talk about architecture and they frame the architecture in a way where each frame is its own piece of art uniquely. You're not just looking at the building that is an artistic accomplishment, but rather you're looking at the building from a specific point of view, a scope, an angle that adds its own personality to it. From all of those pieces of what it's intending to do, it's a 10 out of 10. It's perfect. It does exactly what you want it to do. I think John Cho gives a career-defining performance, a thing that people like to say a lot, but it's the first time he's not just like funny or a side character. It's the first time I've seen him just really just be a human being that you understand, you feel for, you feel conflicted on. You don't always like him, but you definitely relate to him, and then sometimes you really feel for him. And it's all just kind of awesome. And in that sense, like I said, there's very little I can criticize. But at the same time, I will, having now said all that, the movie it fires on all cylinders in what it's clearly trying to be. What it is and what it's trying to be is not necessarily a complete package for me as a movie. It's not everything I want to get out of a cinematic experience. That might be different for you, but for me personally it isn't. That's kind of what I want to talk about in this review a little bit. So, like I said, the camera doesn't move at all. I love camera movements. It doesn't mean that you can't have beautiful cinematography without camera movements. In fact, the way this film goes between its static shots and the way they're cut together, and this movie was cut by Kogonada, as you probably would have guessed, the guy that directed it, because he does a lot of editing for online shit, for his video essays. But the way it deals with editing and static cinematography, again, creates very dynamic feeling things. It works quite well, and yet at the same time, without those close-ups, without that motion, when these people who are pretty much just talking and smoking cigarettes for 90 minutes. That's really all this movie is two people talking and smoking cigarettes for 90 minutes. Not really fighting ever, not really engaging in particularly exciting high fidelity of their emotion. There is some screaming and crying towards the end, but it's mostly just talking and smoking cigarettes. That is fun to watch and fascinating, but it didn't always make me feel like I was in the room with someone that I care about, you know what I mean? It's not like they're my friends or a relationship that I'm rooting for necessarily. And to me, that's kind of an issue. Again, hard to criticize the movie fully if its intention is not to make you feel that way. But after a certain amount of time watching these characters, while I can appreciate the beautiful imagery, boy, this movie makes you want to smoke cigarettes. It makes it seem so appealing. While you can appreciate all of the nice mood that it's delivering, when you don't necessarily feel for the characters, that lends to a little bit of a shallow lack of payoff in the end when the characters do make, at least one of the characters makes a pretty big life decision that it's been building up towards, and the emotional impact doesn't really hit. I don't really care what this character decision was. Again, I was not bored. I don't dislike the character. A lot of times movies fuck up because they make you, they fail at making you like the character because you're not endeared to them, you don't understand them, you think they're poorly written, you don't believe that they're real people, etc., etc. And while this movie does not fail at really any of those things, I didn't in particular ever get endeared to the characters enough, other than just the fact that they're attractive people being performed by very charismatic actors, but the characters themselves aren't charismatic. Does that make any sense? So, yeah, a Columbus, a movie that is filled with beautiful architecture, beautiful performances, beautiful cinematography, and just really sharp editing, is a movie that I personally can't say I loved. I can understand why someone else could, and I wonder how you guys felt as far as like the resolutions of these characters. I know this is kind of different than the reviews we normally do. We're usually a little bit more critical, or if I loved the movie like Annabelle or whatever, we're a little bit more excited. This is kind of deflated, but it's hard to be, in my opinion, it's hard to be that excited about a film like this. It doesn't beg your attention, your excitement. There's nothing about it that is striking other than the fact that it is really good at being not particularly memorable. That's just me. Like I said, I'd love to hear what you guys think of this film. If I had to give it a star rating, it's hard to do, but it's easily a 3 out of 4. It's a movie that really does deserve attention. If you're looking for something very arty, the kind of shit that people really imagine when they talk about the true cliches of like indie film or like a festival film or something of that nature, it's this. So if you're in for a thinker, if you're in for something that's slow moving, just a rumination on characters, in a way that again is different than movies I've seen before, in that it's a dissection of people and it's a rumination on people that are not particularly emotional beings. Whereas usually when you see a movie like this, it's about really emotional people and you're watching, something like Moonlight. Anyway, if you're looking for something like that, if it sounds like something you'd be interested in, this is worth a watch. It's always nice to support Asian leads or just non-white leads in general. And yeah, check it out. This is the Manhattan Project. We review a movie usually more critically and more analytical than how I did this every single day. So tune in tomorrow for another review, and then the next day, and then the next day, and then the next day.